So tonight we're going to start out with a transportation fleet update, and Kevin DiPoalo, our Director of Transportation, is here to present.
Good evening. Thank you for having me and allowing me to present on behalf of our transportation department tonight. What we're taking a look at is our fleet as a whole, and something that Dr. Rushi and I had looked at roughly 4 years ago, and our, let me see if I can pull up the spreadsheet for you. So we took a look at this 4 years ago. Our transportation fleet was very old and very dated. The average lifespan of a school bus was 10 to 12 years. And at the time, our school buses, we had 32, I believe, was the exact number, that were 12 to 15 years or older. So we really took a hard look, and we wanted to kind of get back on track, and we knew that the summer of 2025 was our year to get back on track, and really, have a newer school bus fleet. That being said, this district and this school board did a great job of allowing us to purchase propane school buses, alternative fuel powered propane school buses. And as you can see from this spreadsheet here of what's really in the red, is our school buses that are right at their replacement year of 12 years, as well as some vans. And then really, after this summer, there's a 3-year buffer where we're not purchasing any vehicles for the transportation department. So you see those 2 vehicles that are in white there, they are actually activity passenger vans. They are not scheduled to be purchased until the summer of 2028. So this, really allows us some time to catch up. We'll have a newer fleet. It'll allow us to be the only district in Delaware County, and I believe even Chester County, that would be 100% alternative fuel powered by propane school buses. And we will have 0 diesel school buses on the road transporting students. That's a big deal. Like I said, we'll be the only school district in Delaware County that'll be that way. So what we're asking for tonight is to really get the approval to purchase, as you can see, 4 48 passenger wheelchair accessible propane powered school buses, and also 4 9 passenger vans that allow us to travel outside of the 10-mile radius and the restrictions with some of our special ed or special needs students, where we're sending a vehicle to Souderton, to Coatesville, and a vehicle that doesn't need to be a 48 passenger or a 72 passenger. We're also looking to purchase 1 garage mechanics truck, which you can see is the top line there. Currently we have a 2006, so almost, about 18 years old. That truck is used for any kind of breakdown that we may have in the district, and not just school buses, but also our maintenance vehicles. It allows us to move those school buses. We hook them up with chains, and we're able to move them off any dangerous road that we may have to do repairs right on the side of the road, as opposed to paying about $500, $600 to get that school bus towed either back to our yard or to a shop where we would need to get it fixed. Looking at some costs associated with that. For the garage mechanics truck, we're looking at $96,373.90. For the 4 propane powered school buses, we're looking at $616,892. And then for the 4 9 passenger vans, we're looking at $319,152, totaling for those 9 vehicles $1,032,417.90. We have applied for the EPA, the 2023 EPA Clean School Bus Rebate. We were denied that in May, and then in October, I believe it was October 21st, we were actually awarded it. The original denial was because Haverford was a non-prioritized school district. Non-prioritized meaning not a tribal district, not a charter school district, not a rural school district, those types of things, or a low-income school district. Kind of surprising in October when we were awarded that. It was $125,000. We are actually currently, we asked for an extension and we're working with the EPA, looking to get an answer to see if we could, use some of these vehicles that we may be getting rid of to, towards that grant money. That's, something that's really good for us. Any questions?
I just want to be clear that it's the red, we're looking at the red items that you're...
Correct. Yeah, everything in green is all the propane vehicles that we have purchased. And you'll see the new fuel type there in green after really 2028. And with this 3-year buffer, it allows us to look at either propane or electric school buses, if that's, a direction that the district may want to go. Once we get these 4, if we get these 4 approved, we will have 62 alternative fuel powered propane school buses in our fleet. And like I said, 100% of our diesel buses will be removed from the fleet this summer.
I have a question also, and in a little while we're going to hear, Mr. Tosta and I were at a electric vehicle, electric bus grant
Yep.
webinar a little while ago. I'm just wondering, I know that we have a 3-year kind of hiatus, if you will. If that grant, however, is a possibility, if we decide to pursue that, would it be possible to start a pilot program maybe with a couple of those EV buses? We have obviously propane buses now, but is there room right now for those things to kind of test them out?
Yeah, so right now we are maxed at capacity down at 50 Hilltop Road where we're at. If we were going to look into that pilot program, we may need to look into a satellite location of where those buses could be, stored. I do know the webinar that you were talking about. I actually went out to Unionville School District, which actually has, last year they had 2 of the electric school buses. They finally got the second one up and running. I believe it was in April. They had 1 school bus that was running and 1 had a factory default. There are certainly pros and cons, to the electric school bus right now. And, really what I came out of that meeting was really kind of let the market, see what happens with the market right now. See what happens with the infrastructure prices. Pennsylvania isn't necessarily mandating electric vehicles. I believe New York was. So some of those utility companies had incentives that school districts could use. Pennsylvania doesn't have that right now. So PICO doesn't necessarily have that incentive. J.R. Guglielmi did look into what it would take if we had our entire fleet go electric and some of the costs associated down at 50 Hilltop Road. And we were well over $5 million in infrastructure. And then that doesn't include a PICO substation, and if of course, if Haverford Township would allow that, but it's certainly something. Yeah, it's like you said, during that buffer period, it's certainly something that we're willing to look at. If the school board wants to go in that direction. But where we're at right now, that being said, with the propane powered school buses, we're in a heck of a spot with the propane tank, the 18,000 gallon propane tank that was purchased a few years ago, and all that infrastructure that was done. Like I said, we'll be the only district in Delaware County that has 0 diesel powered school buses, and that says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a great spot, and by the way, thank you for the input on this. It's fantastic. I think it's something to be celebrated. My only question was because we have this 3-year buffer period, rather than trying, I know that there are some districts that have had issues when they go to electric. I know Philadelphia, for example, had some issues when they got so much buses. If we have 3 years to kind of play with, but 3 years to kind of test these out, especially for shorter routes. I know one of the issues with these is that if we're taking kids out to like downtown area, for example, and there's traffic, you don't want to have a bus strand of that there. So we're going to need fuel buses, whether propane or gas for at least some of our routes. I'm thinking for some shorter routes, and to bring them in as some test program. I don't know what the details of the grant are. I don't know if there are costs associated with it. But definitely, it's something I mean, if there's a spot that we could put them in, as like I said, the pilot location, I think that would be a great opportunity.
For sure. No, it's definitely a good idea to take a look at. Like I said, with that buffer window, it definitely helps us to be able to look at that and not really be crunched with time.
Right.
And
Great
I know
job,
with the webinar we attended, the grant that they listed had a maximum award of $300,000 per applicant. And what they would pay for is the incremental difference
Okay.
between the bus and then an electric vehicle. So that's kind of where
Sure.
the funding
Yeah.
would stay.
Yeah.
Would you be able to just summarize some of the benefits of having the largely propane fleet and environmental or operational benefits?
Sure. So we're saving roughly choose about $4,000 to $6,000 per bus. So I know I have it written down here. Over the
I didn't even know
I
he was
do
going to.
over the lifespan, you know, that 10 to 12 year lifespan of the bus, you're looking at a savings of $2,976,000 that the school district saving just by going propane. A lot less oil in a propane vehicle. It's great for the environment. You know, any kind of exhaust that you see coming from a propane bus is just water vapor essentially. So I know we had talked about it before, really getting rid of some of those you know, idling diesel powered vehicles. That the signs that you may see at like Chatham or some of our schools, we can remove them because every single one of our vehicles would not be diesel. So, you know, there are a lot of savings with the propane as opposed to a diesel vehicle.
Thank you. And then just for my note taking, I think you mentioned 9 new vehicles. The chart here looks like 11, is that correct?
Yeah, so we're actually, we only need 4 48 passengers and then 4 9-passenger vans. That's what we're asking for. And those 9-passenger vans, we'd ordered 6 last year. We still have not received them. I'm sorry, we had actually ordered 7. One of them is for the PATH program. It was a wheelchair accessible van. We still have not received them, which is why I'm here about 2 months early presenting this, because we really, you know, we need to get those ordered due to supply and demand and get those in our fleet.
Let me just point of clarification, I'm sorry, you said they don't produce, the propane are cleaner than diesel, but they don't produce water vapor, that would be.
Correct.
But they produce carbon dioxide still.
Yes, correct.
It's water vapor, I was just wanting to make sure.
Yeah, no. Any kind of diesel exhaust, you know, the DEF fluid,
Yeah.
you're gonna save on all that.
No, I
Yeah, and then gallons of oil also.
Sure.
And then this might be a question for Mr. Testa about the total cost of this and how would that be funded?
Yes. So I believe the estimate, and Kevin, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's about $1 million.
Correct.
So we do have the bond series 2023 that the board authorized. Part of that was for the replacement of school buses. That was part of the narrative for the debt series. So with about a little bit more than that left in that fund, we would have the ability to use the debt to pay for those buses.
A quick question, I didn't see on the list the utility, the box truck that the band uses. That thing is pretty old.
It is. Great question. I believe JR has that on his list to be replaced next school year. Yeah, but you're right, that is definitely an older vehicle. But again, you know, our mechanics do a really great job of preventative maintenance to keep those vehicles running, which, you know, is why we have our vehicles last, and we've had them last for up to 15 years or so, or even longer with this garage mechanics truck.
Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So the motion to approve the purchase of these vehicles will be on a future agenda, so this will just give you the ability to discuss that option. So our second item this evening is a update on the renovations at Chatham Park Elementary, any change orders involved, and then an update on the pending Coopertown renovations. And within that update, you'll see that when Jeff presents as well, is the inclusion of Oakmont and some renovations to the front area.
Do I need to press this or pull it up? Great. So this is good evening, everyone. Just wanted to give a brief update on Chatham. So this is the, the spreadsheet where we kind of summarize where everything's at, the original contract values, change orders approved to date, and then where, of course, contingency and allowances lie. So overall, we feel the project's in good shape from a budget standpoint. So we started the project with $1.5 million in contingency, and there's about $940,000 left right now. In addition to that, we have allowances built into the contracts of around $315,000. Of that, only a little over $6,000 has been spent, so we have $308,000 left there. So between the two, you're over $1.2 million left, so we feel very comfortable, especially now being out of the ground. Most of the big site work is done. We do have the underground basin out front to do, but with foundation work, there was a number of little issues that came up, and site utility, so that's a lot of the costs that have been spent to date. So overall, the budget is in good standing. We do have one change order tonight for some structural glass changes that had to happen in the library exterior wall. It's a little over $6,000. So that's the only change order that's on the agenda for next week. Any questions about the budget and the status of that? I'll give an update on the project. But any calls, questions? All right, great. So then overall, the project's moving along well. I think, we've mentioned at the last meeting, the rear classroom wing is a little behind schedule, working through that. Actually, they're gonna be working this Saturday and Sunday, doing masonry. But there's a plan, and we're confident that they'll catch up. It's probably about 2 weeks behind where we want it to be right now. So that's why they're working this weekend to really try and push things along. And of course, we're in the winter months, so if we get extreme cold, then it's going to be difficult to continue with the masonry. But overall, the project's moving along well. So really, no complaints. Contractors are all folks we've worked with in the past, with the exception of the GC. But they seem to be really pushing and trying to get the job where it needs to be. Any other questions? Great. Well, with that, Jeff's gonna present where we're at with Coopertown.
And did you need to give any of the change orders specifically?
It's just the one change order for structural glass change. It's a little over $6,000. We had to add a mullion to the glass because of the weight, without boring you with the details, so it did have to be upgraded. So that's the only change order on the agenda for next week.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to do an update of Coopertown. Probably I'm going to start off with really the changes have been very modest from what we originally presented to everybody. And I think part of that is everything that we had developed and worked with Ken's team as well as the administrative team, really lessons learned from Chatham Park, we were able to bring into Coopertown and then move very quickly into design. So we're going to do an update of the site plan, some floor plan refinements, some preliminary 3D renderings, and then we're also going to talk, as had been mentioned, we're going to be doing some renovations at Oakmont, and then talk briefly about the cost estimate and schedule. So site-wise, really we're looking, initially we were looking at expanding the parking on the front of the building, but after further discussion with the township and square footage of the building, really we're looking at minimal additions. I think even roughly under about 10 parking spaces. So total we'll have 85 parking spaces on the site. We're also looking at, you can see in the gray to the right, an egress exit, secondary exit for buses from the campus, and that's probably the substantial change as far as parking and circulation on the site. We're also looking at a pedestrian sidewalk along the right side of the site that you can see there. We're looking at expanding some of the outdoor play hardscape adjacent to the gymnasium, and then just accommodating egress from the two new classroom additions on the back of the building. So overall, for the building, we're looking at a new administration with secure entry. We're looking at podding the classroom grades throughout the building, relocating the media center as well as the cafeteria, a complete renovation of the kitchen and expansion. Expanding the current lobby, and really a lot of that's taking over the sort of the outdoor classroom area at the main entry that really isn't utilized. So really internalizing that as a main lobby space, so for circulation right outside of the kitchen, or I'm sorry, the cafeteria and the library. And then we're also grouping the music classrooms that you see in the sort of pink magenta right to the left of the gymnasium, and then relocating the art classroom in the building.
Could I just ask?
Yes.
Can you go back to the other slide? The M at the top.
M for
that's
media,
not-
media
okay.
center.
But it's a library.
Yeah, it's sort of interchangeable in the industry. I apologize for that. So very often it's called media center or library. Those are interchangeable, and I think the reason everybody's going media center is just the amount of technology, and frankly, you're seeing less stacks in a modern library. At the elementary school, you do still see a lot of that just because of the physicality of young students, holding a book.
Right, I just didn't want someone looking at this and seeing.
No, definitely a good point. And we're gonna, and some of the subsequent slides, we're gonna actually zoom in on some of those areas so we can talk about that a little bit more. But thank you for that clarification. So this is the main entry and office suite. So creating a secure vestibule, very similar to the standards that the district has put in place for the other buildings. So both entry in the morning, but then what are the procedures once you go into your school day of really locking down that main entry, and then anybody visiting has to come through sort of a secure entry and into the reception before then they would have the ability to go back out to the school. Grouping of the reception also adjacent to the nurses suite, and then the guidance and counseling suite sort of on the back of the administration, and the ability for those three departments really, while they have separate entrances from the building, they can all access each other for support. But having those separate exit or entries so that a student, whether they feel like they're going to guidance, they don't necessarily feel like they're going to the office or to the nurses suite. Okay. So moving to the kitchen, cafeteria, and the media center that we just spoke of, you see sort of up on the screen. The media center and the cafeteria is really a reconfiguration of what was the previous auditorium, which was underutilized just with the current curriculum for the school. We also expanded, took over the previous stage area, and we're able to expand the cafeteria, which brings that out onto the main lobby. So instead of somebody coming into the building and having to go down sort of having access to the building and going down some corridors, it's right there at the main entry. That also gives you the ability for after schools use, things of that nature, and then to be able to lock down sectors of the building. That also allowed us then to expand the kitchen complex and receiving, which was substantially undersized, and make it more comparable to your other schools within the district. And I would note, I mentioned for Chatham Park, the lessons learned on Chatham Park when we're doing the initial layout for the kitchen. It allowed us to move very quickly with the food service consultant along with your food service team to lay out those spaces. This is the gymnasium as well as the music suite. Also some of the green areas, autistic support, some of your special education that we've worked with your team of how that's distributed evenly throughout the building. So grouping the two music classrooms, and then probably one of the big changes is with the gymnasium, you had a very large gymnasium. We've now we were able to decrease the size of the gymnasium slightly, make it more comparable to some of your other elementary schools, which allowed us to put a stage platform on the one end of the gymnasium without having to put an addition onto the building. So that's something that everybody sort of felt that has worked very successfully on the layout of the building. Moving to the 2 new classroom pods, and again trying to group them in classroom wings, and this is something that we've worked out with your building administrative team at the school, is what goes into this specifically. For instance, 3rd grade had sort of been partly in the existing building, partly at this, and really had been a request to really try to focus on grouping the grades together so that they could support each other in teaming. So, but then also accommodating learning support, special education, open collaborative area, which is the sort of the tannish area with the C, as well as small group instruction, as well as support, whether it be storage, restrooms, things of that nature. And then moving to the opposite side, 3rd grade was in the one new addition, 5th grade is in the other, and again, that distribution of the SG is small group instruction, LS is learning support, as well as whether it be teacher aides, electric rooms, storage rooms, faculty toilets, IDF, mechanical support space. Okay. So what we're now going to show you is just, there's a couple photos up on the screen just of the existing building, and we're going to show you some preliminary renderings that we've been developing and discussing with the administration. That will develop over the coming months, and then we'll come back to you in the future, but we wanted to sort of discuss these this evening, hear any feedback that you might have, and then we can try to incorporate that into the overall design of the building. It's a little bit different than Chatham Park. I think we really focused on, for instance, some of the district red and some of the color selections that had been recently done at Linwood. What we're trying to do at Coopertown is there's been a lot of discussion. For instance, you'll see the image on the bottom right, the stone that's on the exterior of the building, trying to tie into that, which stone was actually original or local to that community. So there was back and forth. Should we replace it, try to utilize that in the design? We're trying to incorporate that, and then that sort of flowed into the look of the overall building. So what you're seeing up on the screen is the 2 images. On the left is the main lobby of the building, and then on the right is the new entrance to the building with the new administration. So we're trying, I'm going to focus on the 2 images to the right first. We're trying to maintain the brick, or I'm sorry, the stonework that's on the existing building, most notably what was the auditorium, which will become the new media center. You have the pitched roof that's on the media center was a little bit of a challenge. Just how do we tie in a new addition? So what we're doing is taking the roof of the new addition and then folding that up to 1.5 stories, and then utilizing the same angle as the media center existing. So it's sort of this trying to interplay of having a new form, but then trying to be respectful to the existing building. We're also working to incorporate the window or new windows into the media center, which did not exist in the auditorium for the building. And then more than likely the masonry on the exterior of the administration building, we won't really be able to replicate that stone, and if you try to, you're never going to get it quite right. So what we're making a switch to a brick that's complementary of it, but a shift so that we're not just trying to utilize a stone that never quite gets that match correct in the building. Okay. Now, so we utilize the red tone metal panel on Chatham Park, and we had a lot of discussion, and we actually went through some early renderings that did we try to incorporate that here. It just did not seem to be appropriate with the stonework and the finishes of the existing of the remainder of the building, which were, for instance, all the new windows, or all the windows are in good condition. Obviously, the roof has recently been replaced, so it just did not seem to fit just at the main entrance to switch that. So that's why you're seeing more of an anodized or silver metal panel that's a little bit more subtle and ties into the materials of the building. But what we are trying to do is the main lobby that you can see in the bottom right image, there's a lot of visibility into that main lobby, and so we were trying to bring the district red that's visible, especially at night when the building's lit up, as somebody walks up to the building. And that's what you see in the two renderings on the left side, is that main lobby going back from the main entrance that reaches back both from the entrance to the media center and then secondarily the entrance to the cafeteria. And the red bulkhead that you see in the lobby, and then we would incorporate the sort of the message wall that you've utilized at your other buildings with, I think it's like 25 different languages to say hello. So it's creating that consistency, but in a different tone from your other buildings. That's probably the large takeaway, is just sort of seeing that form, the ability to bring natural daylight going back into the building. And then you would drop down to a standard height hallway as then you go into the classroom wings. We would also have lockdown doors at each of those locations so that after school use, in the evenings you could lock the classroom wings down, but then that main lobby could still be available if you were doing something whether at the media center or the gym or the cafeteria in the evening. Okay. This will continue to develop. We're looking at some secondary colors, for instance, some blues. We'll be adding light fixtures, ductwork into this, but we wanted to show you something preliminarily this evening with some of the colors that we're discussing, but we anticipate that this will evolve as we move forward to completing the design in the next 2 months and move forward for final documents for bidding. Okay. So I want to stress the word preliminary. We're still working through these. Any feedback that you would have as we wrap things up here for the presentation. So the next component is what we found was the bidding the middle school cafeteria addition was very successful on Chatham Park as doing as an alternate. So we're going to do the same thing with Coopertown related to the district office. There's been a strong discussion about the main lobby here, that you sort of come in and you're really just coming into a corridor and there's really no reception coming to the district office. So what you're seeing is in the upper left-hand corner is the existing layout. You go through the doors, but then you sort of have to go through two separate additional doors really to check in. And what we're looking at is moving some of the functions around in that, and then opening the one wall so that as somebody comes through the doors, then they're coming into a true reception, can be received and checked into the building. And then we're also trying to accommodate a little bit better your tax collector, sort of a check-in window so that it doesn't disturb your staff quite as much, and then some finish upgrades in that location of the building. And again, this will be set up as an alternate to Coopertown, and the idea is a very small project like this probably wouldn't necessarily attract bidders, but when we make it part of the larger project for Coopertown, because of the number of contractors that will be interested in that project, you'll then get very competitive pricing also for the Oakmont renovation. Okay.
Jeff, as you're getting ready to move on, just
Yes.
it might be of use to remind the board of information that we shared during the summer. With the change in tax collection, we had over 3,400 people, close to 3,500 people came to pay their taxes in person here. Our entryway is just not set up for that. Even when this was a school, there weren't that many people coming through. So
I mean, I know as an architect, I was shocked when your team had presented those numbers to us, and the disruption that you're trying to run the district along with that accommodate that tax office.
To the people who are coming in to pay their
Definitely
taxes.
welcome
So I appreciate, Jeff, what you and Ken were able to do in terms of minimize the scope of the work, but create a better flow and hopefully a more welcoming environment.
Okay. So that's where we are with Oakmont right now. Okay, cost estimate, really, this slide has not changed from when we presented to you previously. I think the takeaway is just the preliminary cost that we had related to the project, and probably the large takeaway is what's at the bottom is, for planning purposes, we've turned the drawings over to third-party cost estimate that's being starting now to be brought before all of you in January. In fact, today we completed a 50% design development package, and not 40 minutes before this meeting, I saw the emails from my team transferring those documents to the cost estimator so that they can start that. This project is moving very quickly, and I think one of the advantages of the reason it can is, I've mentioned this a few times, the lessons learned that we had at Chatham Park. That's good and bad. We're moving so quick because of what we've learned from the past. But it's a challenge for the cost estimator, just because now they, we really had to get to a point where the drawings were at a point where we were showing casework, cabinetry, layouts, so that they could actually put those costs to that. And we're at that point now and turned those over to the cost estimator today, and they've made a commitment to early January to have a draft cost estimate to us. Okay. So schedule, and this is a little small on the screen, but probably the takeaway is, and I'm going to focus maybe on jump on a few of these, but we will be bringing that cost estimate to you roughly on January 23rd at the board meeting. We will also be bringing the Act 34 booklet to you for your review that evening. And then subsequently, we'll be coming to the February board meeting for the approval of that booklet, and for the Act 34 to occur as we are preparing to go to bid. Stepping back with some of the approvals, we have turned over the paperwork for the zoning hearing board component. We're also moving towards the submission the beginning of January for the Township, for the Planning Commission. And then also that exit for the buses that we showed on the site plan. We're looking for a highway occupancy permit for that being submitted on January 6th, and everything appears to be moving well. And Ken, I think one of the big things we heard was not having the requirements for the conditional use. Those were early on some things that we thought we were going to have to incorporate, but the approvals seem to be moving well with us right now. Ultimately, we're looking to complete documents March 6th and be ready to go to bid. And then we would be opening bids in the beginning of April, and then bringing those to you towards the end of April for your review and approval for the project. So all told, we seem to be moving very well with the project and on schedule right now. Okay. So with that, open it up to any questions, and I can jump back to any component if anybody would like me to. If not, we'll keep moving. Yes?
I have one question, and I know you presented this before, like the 2 additional classrooms. I just wondered, was it like driving it to be symmetrical, or like the overall layout? How do we select that?
Good question. We were trying to pod the grades, and quite frankly, just we weren't having to add enough classrooms or educational spaces where we would make some type of loop or something of that nature. So just naturally with the shape of the building. We're also trying to work around existing playgrounds. To the left of the second grade wing is existing modular classrooms that we're trying to work around. So locations that we might have just done, for instance, one larger addition that just didn't quite make sense, or would be extending into play fields, things of that nature.
Right. I'm just looking at it, and he's creating a little bit of a dead area in there between the two. Is there going to be a landscaping component, or?
I can't answer that exactly right this minute. I think more just for maintenance of your facilities, probably that would be sort of a seated and grassed area. We were trying to make sure that we kept open. The one advantage of that form is it makes sure that all the educational spaces are naturally daylit, which is always an important aspect. So we can have some discussion about that with the
So
team.
what is orientation in this drawing? I can't remember. Where is north?
Ken, I'm sorry, I forget the orientation. Always, I get mixed up. Yeah, the upper,
Right.
that sounded, yeah, the upper, sort of going to the upper right.
I gotta get,
So
Yeah.
the new classrooms will get the southern exposure?
we have a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Speaking of that, actually.
Yes, sir.
That's neat. That's a good segue. I know that we'll be hearing in a few minutes about a presentation on solar at other schools, Chatham and Linwood. I'm just curious, I know that we're having some questions about whether or not we can do it at Navarro Coopertown because of the roof pitch and everything. For the additions, especially the ones that have southern exposure, will those be flat roofs, or could they be made to be flat roofs to be
The
solar ready?
two additions are flat roof, and we are working on the alternate right now related to the solar on the building. I'm gonna say, I will put out one caveat to that. We're actually looking, and I don't know, me and Ken even haven't had a lot of discussion. We were just having this discussion last day with our engineers. We are looking to put the majority of the solar array on the existing building, and that has to do with Act 34 capacity. Elementary schools, it's very you go up against the Act 34 capacity for the state very quickly. So when you put something like a solar array on new construction, it drives up the cost per square foot for the addition. It's a nuance for Department of Education, but that, just be prepared. That's probably why, when you do see the final array and it's on the existing building, there's a very set reason why we're looking at that. So.
I know that that we are looking at some issues on the new existing roof, but I guess we'll.
And the structural engineer has
look at that
looked.
at a later time. I just want to make sure that they be ready, in the event that the current roof couldn't handle it, so.
The structural engineer has looked at it preliminarily. His review is that it can accommodate solar arrays. Really, it's not the panels themselves; it's the ballasting of those.
Yeah.
And the slopes on that roof are very adequate for an array and the orientation of the building.
All right.
So, okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. If not, we'll turn it over. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, so next up, we have one more. That's okay, sorry, we have one more. Jamie Schlesinger from
I'll be quick.
PFM is going to explain this, how we're going to afford all of this in the next, on this year.
Okay, hold on. You've seen this one. You got that one?
One second, sorry.
I'll be pretty brief here since we've discussed this concept and process a few times in the past. So for tonight is a discussion about the proposed resolution that we're going to be considering at the next meeting on the 19th. This is the parameters resolution that is essentially authorizing the finance team and administration to move forward with the next phase of the capital project funding. Because of the speed at which the team is working on the building projects, you need some money. So obviously we want to make sure that we have the money in a quick enough time to adequately pay for the projects itself. We made minor adjustments in our last meeting and at least last conversations over the last few months. We're going to be asking you to consider a maximum parameters of $30 million. That would allow for us to cover the balance of the project from Coopertown, Chatham Park, and the middle school cafeteria. And that would cover most of the cost, but we'd have another transaction next year, which would be a cleanup issuance that we've currently discussed in the past. So depending on how all the bidding comes back, depending on how all the alternatives come through, we'll finalize what that final balance of the transaction would be. So for purposes of discussion for tonight, the maximum parameters will be $30 million. We expect the overall financing to be about 26 to 27 million, but because we're doing this in advance of actually pricing bonds early next year, we always have to have a higher principal amount, a higher interest rate, and a final maturity established, and that is always the way we do it. It gives us the flexibility to adjust the payments after we price the bonds. Never borrowed too much money here, I can tell you that. Based on that, you'll notice when you do see a resolution that will have a maximum rate of 5.5%, and the amortization would mature in the 2044 fiscal year. So we're keeping within kind of the standards of about 20-year overall term. For purposes of discussion, once we get this all said and done, we're probably looking at a annual payment of all debt somewhere in the $15 million range, just over that. And that includes the assumption for the 26 issuance. When you look at that total debt service, principal and interest, and your total budget in the general fund, we're around the 10% range. So that fits within kind of the standards of a AA2 credit rating, which is what the school district has and has maintained over the last few years. So I think we fit, just nicely in the position that we expect to be in. And as long as it keeps things chugging along and the cost of the projects fit within this range, I think we're in a good place. So I certainly, as you know, can go into very long details on what it looks like, but from our planning purposes, we're kind of in line with this. Our goal would to have the money by sometime in February, and based on how the draw schedules are looking, I think that should be around the time you start to run out of some money. So it'll work out pretty well.
I'll note that the board has received your packet.
Yes.
It's not up on.
It's not up on the screen. I know you got it.
But we do have it.
Yeah. Certainly, again, if you want me to go over any of the pages or anything like that, but this is really nothing out of the ordinary from our previous discussions.
And Jamie, just looking at your one sheet that shows the coloring, the different colored columns.
Yep.
So essentially, we'd be going from a $13.5 million annual debt service to $15 million.
That's
For the
correct.
25-26 budget. Just
Yep. Yeah. So there's exactly right. So when you're looking at that's the green, by the way, I should point out. So that makes the assumption we do another transaction next year. But you want to always look at that big. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Sorry, what page?
Oh, you're on.
You're on
Just
there.
go right there. Perfect. It's the colored page that we always look at. So tough to see for the people in the crowd, but when you're looking at the red section, that's the transaction that we're looking to do this year, or I say this year, the 25 calendar year, of about 26 to 27 million dollars. So for budgetary purposes, yes, Tony, it would be about 15-ish million dollars between on the local effort side. I'd also point out one of the considerations that we're going to add to this is capitalized interest as one of the purposes. So if you look on column 15, which is the black section, that's the total amount of capitalized interest that we would have in the transaction. What that means is we'd be borrowing some funds to cover the interest expense in one of the fiscal years. And what that does is it allows you as the board some additional capacity to phase in any millage increase necessary that's tied to all the projects put together. So when you look at column 17, you'll notice a nice smooth transition of millage necessary. So you go from 0.11 mils to 0.17 to 0.17 again. So if we didn't have that capitalized interest, you'd have a higher bump up in your budget. This just allows you to smooth it over a little bit more. So overall, all of these projects that we've done between Chatham Park, the middle school cafeteria, and Coopertown, as estimated, would be about 0.44 mils. So we've been talking about a half mil. We'll be under that as things are looking right now.
Just had a follow-up question on the millage.
Sure.
I'm still trying to, it says net local effort on column 16, capping at 15 mil, and it says estimated millage 0.17, but that doesn't seem to jive with one collected mills seem to be 6 million, so I'm just curious how the millage was calculated.
So, 6 million. 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 6 million
doesn't seem to be a straight conversion that,
Yeah, it's, you essentially take it's the incremental amount from one year to the next.
okay.
So you have, if you have a $13.5 million total number going to 14.5, that's the incremental.
Got it, thank you.
Sure. And like everything else, I always point out, you know, when we borrow money, and let's make the assumption that the rate is 4%, you can also put that money into an account to earn interest. And, you know, again, these days, we're still collecting somewhere around the 4.5% range. So we'll, you know, continue to keep doing that. We won't have that special advantage I talked about in the past, because we're borrowing more than $15 million. But more than likely, what will happen is when the Fed does drop interest rates potentially again next year, we'll start to see the short-term rates on your investments drop down as well. So we may come pretty close to what your overall earnings are and what you're borrowing at, but that'll be something we'll monitor over the next few years. So, unless someone has any other questions, you know, then the next step, as you know, we'll be at the meeting on the 19th. As I always say, you'll see some more suits in the audience. We'll have your bond counsel, ourselves, the underwriters come to the meeting. I'm, you know, obviously happy to give the similar presentation to lead into your, you know, request to adopt the resolution. And then from there, you know, we're already doing some background work, as Tony knows, to kind of get us ready to go for the credit rating. And if all goes well, we'll have some pricing done, you know, early 2025 calendar year, and have the money available to us in February.
And then just for the board's knowledge, there is an ad that will be placed in the Daily Times on Monday discussing that parameters resolution that will be voted on at the next meeting. So in case a member of the public were to say to you, I saw this ad, you know, what is the district doing? That's just part of the process of going out for the bonds, and we make that resolution available for public inspection.
The ad's going to Moody's on here for the rating, and is one of the things you're looking for the audit. What's the status of that?
So we have a ratings call set up that is in the beginning of
January.
So we have a list of questions that I'll go through. Just to, it talks about financial stability and projections for the district. So I'll go through that and work through that with PFM just to make sure that I have everything that we need for that ratings call.
Yeah, and to, you know, one of your points is, you know, the audit is not finalized yet. We're able to use unaudited numbers as part of the process. And, you know, the rating agencies understand that there's always this weird time period that we have in when we have the audits done. You're not required technically, because of how your bonds are set up, to have your audit completed until February 1st to get up to the MSRB and the website. Obviously, we want to have it done, you know, reasonably soon, but we're kind of in that in-between range where most school districts get their audits completed. But, you know, obviously we want to make sure we're providing accurate information, and, you know, they do understand that there's some unaudited numbers in there. And you guys have had a strong run of good years as a district here, providing, you know, funds going to your capital reserve, and I think as long as you continue to maintain that concept, you know, there's nothing to be concerned with. That's it. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
All right, so up next, we're going to talk about the solar facility site assessment conducted by Ron Celentano of Celentano Energy Services.
Yeah, hello. Ron Celentano here. I've been in the solar world for quite a long time. I have my colleague here, Mark Connolly, PE. I guess I've been involved in the photovoltaics as a consultant, mid-90s, so it's been quite a few decades. Mark, not being too far behind, I think early 2000s, been deep in it as well. So I really cover the gamut with all kinds of analysis, but also we get pretty dirty up there on the roof too. So we design systems, we've wiring stuff up, so we know PV, photovoltaics quite well. So this is all about what recently was passed in Pennsylvania. I guess it was about 2 months ago, Solar for Schools grant program, and what followed that was that there was really no money for that grant program until the budget was passed. So there's now $25 million available for solar for schools and it's quite of a broad list of types of schools that can get this grant. Boy, I have to remember what the acronym stands. DCD is the one who is implementing this program out of the state, and they came up with guidelines by which the school can submit an application for it to get that grant, or to see if they qualify for that grant. And one of those criteria for the application is to have a solar assessment done, or a solar facility site assessment. And that couldn't be done by the actual installer. There was an importance of a conflict of interest that was separating that. So that's where I was then called in by Mr. Tessa, basically to look into this. So we looked at 3 schools initially, and I'm going to talk about, or we could talk about Coopertown after this. But these are the 2 schools, Linwood and Chatham Elementary Schools, were the ones that we reviewed. And let's see, the first I would mention, okay, let me just go, oh yeah, go ahead. I have to click, all right. There we go. Oh, that was the one I wanted to do. I guess that's good. Yeah, so these are the 2 schools, aerial shots as they stand now that you can see on Google Maps. And these would just be rooftop systems, ballast racking systems, such that they do not penetrate the roof. They're held by ballast or weight to hold them onto the flat roofs. These are all flat roof applications. And I wanted to just bring up really quickly what the financial opportunities are for the schools. We have net metering in place, which has been around for, boy, I think early 2000. Actually, it started in 1998, really, in Pennsylvania, to have net metering. Net metering is a billing mechanism that if you have solar on your roof, you generate power, you can offset the KWH 1-for-1 on the billing for that volumetric part of the bill. That's the KWH, the energy part of the bill. It works really well with residential because our bills are all based on all the energy. But on the commercial buildings or accounts, it's not as lucrative. You can save on the generation part of the bill, the supply part of the bill, but not really on the distribution part of the bill or the delivery charge. So anyway, so that's part of that. That's been around for a long time. That's always been an opportunity for taking advantage of solar. Recently, as you know, the Inflation Reduction Act under the Biden administration, we've had a 30%. They were able to kick it up to back to 30%. There was a 30% tax credit that was there for years. It started to step down, but then they were able to reinstall that 30%. But what was really different and really a game changer was to also allow for nonprofits to get a direct payment, even though they aren't paying taxes, actually by way of a check for that 30%. So schools certainly would apply for that. So that really was a pretty big shift. And then, of course, the schools grant program then came out. And then on top of it, and that actually provides another 30%, 40%, or 50%, depending on the, the financial, criteria of a school district. In this area, it would be only up to, I think, 30% of the total cost of the system, up to $300,000 is that criteria. Then finally, there's an Act 129, which is more of an energy efficiency statute that's been in place for a long time in Pennsylvania, but they just recently had included now solar into that. So there is a utility commercial solar incentive that's available also that can help with reducing some of the costs for, or giving you, either reduce the cost as a savings or provide a revenue stream, if you will. So these are the 4 main things. So we looked at Linwood, of course. This is, we have a rendering of those solar modules that are on, or arrays that are on the roof. And you have to take into account, and Mark is good at this, looking at the crickets that we can see on the roofs, and to really lay them out adequately enough that to avoid any kind of problems that might occur because of having runoff water basically from, storm water going off. You want to make sure that things are flowing well onto the roof, and there's really no complications going on there. So when we lay out, we do a sort of a tech potential. We put out as much as we can feel comfortable putting onto that roof. And we came up with about almost 300 kW that would fit as a capacity. That's DC capacity. That's like as if you took a solar panel, they have a spec of maybe whatever, 500 watts. You sum up all those 500 watts, how many do you fit on the roof? That's how you get to the 294. That would be 294,000 watts of DC capacity that's on the roof. We have the azimuths, we have different orientations, if you will. That's what we have 2 of them there. The roof tilt is only 5 degrees. Again, these are ballasted racking systems. The total, I think this is one of the inputs for the grant application. They want to know what the total roof area is and then what the total solar area, and that's where we came up with these 2 figures. We had very little shading impacts from our best judgment. There's really nothing there that's really going to impact from a shading perspective. And then we have the first year generation of 370,000 kWh a year. And it offsets about 54% of the usage of the building. So I should have mentioned too, so I have gotten 12 months of billing, and I looked at all of that, and basically, that's what it's showing here, yeah. So here we have a table and then related graphs showing on the left side is the solar generation on a monthly basis using a simulation tool that we use. PV Watts is an NREL, it's a DOE recognized simulation tool. It's been around for many decades and well respected. So that's how we came up with the generation on a monthly basis. The second column is the usage from the billing that I've got. And then the third is the net, what's left, with the solar, how much does it offset? And then the on a percentage basis, how much is being offset? So that's how I came up with the 54%. So about half of the school's usage is going to be met with solar. It's interesting when you look at the graphs and you look at I guess it's I'm seeing brown, I'm a little colorblind. So, you're having your highest usage in the summertime by the school. And likely as the sun is you're getting more solar in the summertime as well. So the net is kind of matching that as well. This is the results of the summary of results, basically, from both inputs and outputs of when we did the modeling on this and the costs and bring in the the benefits that we bring in, the federal tax credit, the grant from the school grant, as well as utility Act 2029 commercial incentive. So and a lot of this is very contingent on what is that cost, what is that combined bundled cost for installing the system, and we're using a $2.30 a watt. This is a metric that's typically used in the solar industry. It's $2.30 a watt, so it's really, that times the 294,000 watts. So you're multiplying those 2 numbers together to get that total cost of almost $1 million. I can't see as well from this distance. Is that 600? No, it's not. That's about $1 million, right? I should be looking at my own screen here. See what's going on. So you can see, you can see some of the other benefits we have. We're assuming that this is financed, that their loans would be taken out in order to finance the project. We assume about $150,000 is of capital is coming up front for some of the earlier design engineering. We're looking at 4% interest rates. We initially had, when we first did this, a 6.5% interest rate, but bringing it down to 4 really made this look a lot more attractive. See what else do we have here. So basically coming down to a cash flow positive in just a little bit under 10 years. I have to look at my own screen, or I cannot see that well. Sorry about this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
The 4%, that's the financing?
Yeah.
Okay, got And the positive cash flow payback, that's essentially, that's the payback period.
Yeah, that's, and you'll see this in the next slide. I'm gonna be able to see this better myself here. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so we're seeing that it's about a 10% return on investment and over about $160,000 in the present value. So over 30 years, the net savings is about $420,000. Yeah, so looking at the next slide, kind of actually gives you the pro forma. Yeah.
Escalation.
Oh, escalation.
Yeah, just hit that topic.
Go back. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So we have. Okay. So there's we assume that there's a 3% escalation, at least for the first few years of the billing. So that, we know that electric bills are going up all the time. And I mean, they have rate cases, they have all kinds of other things that come into play, but you have to kind of just capture it in a simple escalation. This is, again, a very typical thing that's used in the industry. It does drop off a little bit after, at least we assumed it drops down a little bit, maybe 2 even to 1% in the later years, but we do have that in play. That's why I have varied in there. And then the inflation rate actually plays more of a role with operating maintenance, that you're going to be dealing with over time. So that's maybe equipment that's going to be used for replacements. That's where the inflation comes into play. So here's, you can't see this too very well, but so this is a 30-year cash flow analysis. And on the far right, if you were able to see it, it's going to, you'll see that that's about where that almost 9+ years is where the negative goes to positive, and that's where you're seeing that positive cash flow take place. So this is kind of showing, also you're selling the solar renewable energy credits too. That was assumed in this too. Right now they're running about $35 per megawatt hour of generation. So we have that assumed for like 20 years. So that's a revenue stream that comes in. The electricity savings. Now this is what what's happening here too, because of the 54% or about half the usage that's happening. I know Haverford has Provident Energy as a broker that oversees and helps with the energy that's purchased for all the schools, and at least for the schools. I don't know if it's beyond the other townships or not, but and I was speaking with them. I know them well. I was talking with them about how this might work, because typically when what you want to do is, when you have solar, many times you want to go back to the default supplier. You want to go back to PICO in order to get the full benefit of net metering. In this case, Haverford School District is with a third-party supplier, which is WGL, I think it's Energy, and they have a little bit lower rate than what PICO would have. So the baseline has to be what you got right now, and that's with the lower rate, and that's what we're comparing everything to. And we're looking at the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is, okay, we'll get solar, we're gonna go now with PICO, so it's gonna cost a little bit more for our electricity. And it doesn't really matter with whatever your rate is if the solar is offsetting it, but it's the remainder of the part of the building that is not being met by solar. You're paying a little bit more for that electricity, and that's where it comes into play. If you were to stay with WGL Energy, then it's actually you're gonna get a better return. And I did that kind of quick math on it too. So, and that is actually probably gonna be the case. It makes sense that you could stay with them, but I want to show the worst case scenario. So, I'm gonna move on to Chatham, but this is, that was basically the run through, and I'll be doing the same kind of run through with Chatham. But this, as we kind of saw before.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yeah.
Before we move from Linwood,
Yeah.
We had a proposal in 2022
Mm-hmm.
in the Green Energy Co-op, and were you provided that?
I was not, no.
Okay. It was interesting because it's very similar.
Mhm.
It came out very similar.
Okay. How long ago was that?
22.
2 years ago? Okay.
I mean, the financials are altered because of the IRA and
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say, one of the sensitive things I mentioned, the $2.30 a watt, or that first cost, we got tariffs coming in. We don't know how much that's gonna impact things, and it's a really, I'm constantly talking to all the industry, and no one has a clue on how that might impact things, so that's another piece to consider. Any other questions on at least this, before just general questions? Okay. So I just want to throw this out in Chatham, where we have, of course, the aerial shot again, but the expansion part of what we're talking about earlier today, in the sort of the upper left section, and also on the right section there. So even though I think the plans here had some layout of modules, we just went ahead and just did our own thing and laid it out ourselves, and but we expanded it out into rendering it onto the areas where the new construction was going to be. And same kind of table that we have here. It's about a hold up a second. Yeah, so this comes out to about 430 watts, kilowatts of capacity, and we have 3 different azimuth angles, same 5-degree tilt. Again, this is a balanced system, no penetrations on the roof, and total building area and the solar area, is kind of there as was needed for the application for the grants. Now we do have more shading here, and this is where we were careful to look very on this, where we know what trees were removed, and we did some simulation of basically the shading impacts, and we kind of came up to about 6% of shading impact. So that's going to have a direct impact, not severe impact, but it definitely has an impact on the performance. And I'm not sure if it really matters, because you're already hitting 101%. So you're generating almost 530,000 kWh, and it turns out, as compared to the bills, it's really reaching almost the full. That is projecting out what the addition's going to be using in terms of electricity. I did a simple relationship on the expansion of the square footage relative to the 12 months of bills that I had, and just did a linear relationship of using a multiplier of 1.84 of a multiplier, so that I could expand out what that usage might be when the construction is in place. So again, on the left side, it's total solar generation. The next column is basically showing what is the existing usage on the 12 months of bills that I had, and then the projected with that 1.2 multiplier on it, and the net. So you can see at the end of the day, we're really kind of perfectly matching what is being consumed, at Chatham. And the profile is different here. I found interesting. You could see again the brown bars, where it doesn't seem like there's much activity, or really as much as in the summertime. And then you got September, and it really kicks in. So that's why you're seeing so much net, really energy being pushed back onto the grid, and getting that credit down, and accumulating, getting it by the end of the year. Now in this case,
Could I just ask a
yes.
question? That might make sense for a school that wasn't previously air conditioned, but we just did get air conditioning
Okay.
at Chatham, so
Okay.
I would expect its energy usage pattern to look more like
Okay.
the Linwood one.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know, and it's interesting to think how. Cause I was gonna say, if this were the way it was going, I'd say this is one, in this particular case, you do want to go back to PICO, because you want to make sure that you're going to get all the credit that you can from net metering, and also I think it comes down to the third-party supplier is seeing the whole district. They just see the one big picture with it. They may not even see this. It might be a blip. They can't even see what's going on with this. But this is where it becomes really important to be talking with Provident Energy. What's the best way to go with a bill like this, given the fact that now you have higher loads, maybe you can get away with no one will see what's going on, and then you can keep it with your existing third party.
Okay, yeah, I think that helps explain where, Chris, you were saying there was consistency with a prior report this was leading to very different conclusions at Chatham than we had
Right.
heard from other analysis, so, but yeah, looking at the building is one that's fully air conditioned.
Yeah, and you know, so, and now that you're, boy,
Which year did you use this from though? Is this from, because
the very latest, I mean, 23, 24, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great.
So the climate control was already installed at that time, so this is the most recent, the climate control was installed a couple of years ago.
Mm.
So this does look to be.
Yeah, I think the billing went to, I mean, so yeah, we're in December. I think the latest bills I may have seen were like July. I mean, there were several months out. That was the last one I could grab, you know, that I had access to. So it may not be capturing the most, you know, reflective of any kind of energy efficiency components that you had in place.
I mean, this was, I mean,
Chiller was done year and a half ago,
Oh,
yeah.
so it should.
So I think you caught, yeah, I think you
oh,
caught.
okay.
It should have the most current data.
Okay, so you're saying the air conditioning is already in place here?
Yes.
Already in place,
Okay.
yeah.
Then, yeah, why would June, which is in school,
No one's in
look
school.
so different in September? I mean, they're in school for
For a
a few
little while.
weeks.
Well, Linwood uses, I noticed when I was comparing these two proposals that Linwood is actually almost double the energy usage, which was odd to me because it's a new building. So I don't understand how we can have such
I'm
a
just kind of
differential.
curious what that's, yeah, a lot, it really made big difference in pattern here. What kind of air conditioning does Linwood have? Is it chillers or is it,
Chiller,
Okay.
chiller
Okay.
boilers.
Maybe it's the site, I mean, Linwood's exposed, I don't know.
Well, Chan also has a lot more roof.
Would it-
Bigger system.
Would it potentially make a difference that we run summer programming at Linwood because it's a newer building?
I mean,
We started to do, we don't run anything at Chatham during the summer because that, like, the air conditioning is relatively new, so our pattern has never been to run a summer event at Chatham.
okay, so that would be
So
reflective
maybe-
here, right?
Maybe that would be some reason.
I mean, that seems to be what should reflect it here. The other thing is, you know, making, again, the projection of a, 20% increase of usage, it's just a linear one, like across the board, so maybe that isn't the best way to go about that, I'm not sure. But that does sound reflective of what you just said, you know. It's like that if you don't have as much activity, and you didn't this last summer, then, you know, that's what you'd see.
I mean, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but one of the things the board has been discussing is the overall energy efficiency of the district, and of course, this, how are we actually using energy, and how are we being the most effective? So it's just interesting to see the two different buildings.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I mean, it's well, this is the kind of stuff someone should be doing, and just, you should be looking at all these bills, I mean, and really doing some analysis, how they compare to each other. And if you can dive even deeper to really see the end uses and how they impact these energy usage.
That's why we need a sustainability plan, by the way, overall. Just on a broad topic, I think that would be something, because I mean, these are the things that I think we have to look at. I don't know that we've seen a full picture of district-wide.
Yeah.
If I can offer an insight, because I've done some school audits, what I would do as an energy engineer looking at that profile is immediately go to the summer and obviously look at how many hours it's operating. But schools operate with a lot of ventilation. That's where all the money is.
Yeah.
If there's not a lot of people in the building, the operations group can turn all the outside air down. That's number one. Number two is dehumidification is becoming a real issue in schools in every building because of the weather. I mean, it's humid, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, not to get too far, into the, ether here, but yeah, I think this just hits home the point that if we did have a sustainability plan district-wide, I think we could really realize some cost savings, and some efficiency savings. I mean, believe me, I want to get solar in many buildings as we can, but looking at efficiencies as well, I think is definitely something that we should explore into next year.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it's, you know, do energy efficiency first, that's the low-hanging fruit, and then you do the solar. But of course, oh, wait, we have the school grant program right here, it's gonna disappear really quick, so. I mean, that application has to be in by, you know, the end of 31st of January to capture some of the 25 million, it's the first come, first served. So, you know, it's gonna be a challenge a little bit, but hey, you won't miss that opportunity. So these are the inputs and results on sort of the financials and the generation and things like that for Chatham, and you can see it's actually a much more attractive case, and the reason why it's more attractive, I did the same thing. I assumed it went to, you switch back to peak up, you basically don't have any energy or electricity that isn't met by solar, so you're not paying that premium for that amount. So that's why this actually is looking a little bit more attractive, in spite of the fact that it has more shading impacts anyway. So, you know, we're under 7 years with a, you know, positive cash flow on this. So same assumptions with the cost of what it takes to, you know, put it in and all kinds of things like that. Yeah, so let me see, and just, and again, cash flow is always, you know, a headache looking at this, but you know, that's really what the bottom line of what comes out of that. And just to quickly show, this is, you know, so here's on the right side, there's the, you know, the obvious solar panel on the left, but on the right side is that balanced racking system, and there's many of them out there. This one seems to be, we were thinking was the best for this. It really, you could put the most capacity of panels on it with the least amount of inter-row shading aspect or pathways between the rows. And these are plastic, right, Mark? They're yeah, so they're just filled with is it, I guess, well, it could be patio block, it could be like, you know, whatever stone. It's, you know, obviously it's some kind of heavy stone-like material, whatever it might be, put in place, and you know, it works really well. And I think the one thing I want to, and this is just the inverter and some other details, the one thing that's really important, this is the end of the presentation, but I want to now bring in Coopertown with that, and we've and maybe verify it. We were seeing that Coopertown had 10-degree pitch roofs, and any racking systems that we've seen that's out in the marketplace, I mean, the best is being able to put it on 7 degrees, but it's more typically on maybe 5 or less. 7 is about the max. So therefore, you couldn't put this kind of system on top of the pitched roof at Coopertown. So that means the only alternative is to have a penetrated type of racking system. So it's not to say you can't put solar on those roofs, you absolutely can, but it then requires a lot more of engineering, and there's really limited types of racking material or equipment that can be used. It'll work, but it really requires a lot more of an effort. Finding the supporting beams to anchor into and to, you know, build it onto that. So it would just cost a bit more, that's all. And Mark, you have anything to add? Go ahead.
Why don't you go to the next 2 slides, because there is one item that I'll just educate you for, yeah.
And could I ask to
Yeah.
come please to the microphone if you're going to be presenting? Yeah, thank you.
The fire marshals of the world decided that being on a roof with a solar PV system was not a good thing. So that started a movement that we're in the middle of right now of installing the item on the right for every single panel. So we actually have a microprocessor for every single panel. In a balanced system, that's okay because you can get under it. In a array that is flush to the roof, where it's not only difficult to reach, but it's also together, it's very, very costly, and I'll caution all of you as homeowners to understand this fact. The good news is that people have, and the technology has changed so that other designs are coming, and this may be a very significant impact on the cost, and that I would recommend to do it, because having 600 microprocessors for 25 years means that you're gonna have a relationship with the manufacturer and with your maintenance guys and your service people that will be costly and difficult to maintain the system's capacity. So that's the situation we're in today. There's good news coming, and hopefully anything that you do purchase, we can advise and you can follow through when getting a system that doesn't include that rapid shutdown device. The other thing about Coopertown and trees, so this is pretty unusual to have a good shading for a school. I love the fact that you have all these old trees. And you saw we have a pretty heavy percentage in there. The cost of solar is low enough that in a situation like this, it's actually reasonable to install something that is going to be shaded. The other sad kind of fact in designing something like this, 30-year analysis, how long are the trees going to last? I hope for that period, but factor deciduous is good for the winter production.
Mark, when you mentioned the comment about the fire marshal, so is this a conversation we have with the township?
No, this is an industry thing. We're stuck with these. I'm telling you that they should enter into, especially if Coopertown proceeds with a flush-mounted system, into the discussion with the maintenance and operating people, because it really is a difficult choice to put on a flush-mounted array a microprocessor under every single module. So,
But it's done. I
It's
mean,
done.
there's thousands
It's
of them
happening.
out there,
But
and there's usually not an issue. I mean, so again, this is what's called rapid shutdown. It's under National Electric Code. So this goes back almost 10 years when it first started, I think, in under National Electric Code. And it's all about when you have that solar array on the roof. If the grid goes down, if there's an outage, you could shut the power to the building. That in the daytime, that whole assembly up there is still hot, as the terminology is. Not that it's in a dangerous way, but if a fire guy was up there and he happened to be stupid and standing in a pail of water with an axe and he cuts through it, he can get fried. And there's almost no history of any of these things happening. But someone took advantage of being able to work the National Electric Code to really require these devices. And what happens is when you do shut the power off with these devices, that voltage kind of comes down to a no-risk level, so there's no danger if you were to cut into those wires under those conditions. So, as Mark said, very recently there have been other products that are coming up that are going to be making this a lot more, you wouldn't have to have these devices underneath each of these modules. There's other ways to work with this. And it's going to bring down the cost as a result of it as well, and they'll still be as effective as they are today.
Just to follow up on that, so what I'm understanding, just for what I'm hearing is, these devices are installed because in the eventuality that somebody has to be on the roof in an emergency situation and cutting through the roof, is that what I'm hearing? The array is still live, even though the building is.
Yeah, you would say like if there were a fire and you had a vent through the roof, you had to break through the array, and they've done these tests.
This is an emergency.
Yeah,
piece of it.
yeah, exactly. And even after all of that, and even after there have been fires, not fires because of the solar, it could be fires for other reasons. You have to still vent, maybe break through the roof. There still has been virtually no issues of anyone getting harmed, under the conditions, because, no one's being stupid in how they cut through these things. Actually, a lot of times they just avoid dealing with the solar panels at all. They go to other areas and they take care of it
So
that
this is
way.
a safety device at the source point at the array itself.
Yeah.
To shut off the array.
Well, no, it's not. It's more like I was saying. I mean, the strange thing about solar, it's getting into the quantum mechanics of solar, is that a solar cell is, you have the sun shining onto the solar cell, and even though it's not connected to anything, it's still essentially hot. It still has a voltage and a current, because you're exciting the electrons. They're just dancing around on that solar cell. So there's the thought of like, oh, if I go in there and cut into that, even though it's not connected to anything, I will then be the load that it's going to deliver the electricity to. That's sort of the issue.
And just to clarify, so, these are things that are required by code
Yeah.
now.
Mhm.
they're already in the price when you estimated the $2.30.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, it's all, yeah, that cost is like all included, everything, including permitting, I mean, permitting, but, yeah, commissioning, everything, inspections, the whole 9 yards. And we always start from that point and then kind of walk it down, so we're seeing a substantial cost, you're almost dropping it into almost half the cost, So, so I don't know what to say about Coopertown, if it's worth, digging deeper into seeing if there is a possibility there or not. We probably have to talk more about that if you want to go further with that.
I mean, for Coopertown, we're looking at that, voting on that expansion coming up in the spring. So we have some time for that. I don't think that would be part of the grant that we're looking for right now, though. So I'm assuming that just based on what I mean, we have, net savings for Linwood of $420,000 over 30 years, and at Chatham, $130,000 over 30 years. So it's some real money. So we're looking to submit for grants for both of those in 2 separate applications, correct?
Yeah, it would be separate, that's why I kind of
And
kept
then
them.
hopefully we'd get, obviously Lib can get both, but in likelihood we probably would get one of those. And then I know that we also, that you're looking at some options where where without the solar for schools grant funding, where I believe there's also still some positive net cash flow in those models as well, correct?
You mean without the grant? I didn't provide that in the, in the analysis.
I don't think we have to right now, because right now we're just looking at the grants, but I do think that we do want to have the information available as we move a little bit farther. And I mean, I think it's simple enough just to say, here's what it would like with solar for schools, payback time, for Chatham, for example, it's, 6.6 years, and, without the grant, it would be, whatever.
I can tell you right now.
Year. Oh,
I mean, okay, so Linwood is
Linwood, okay.
is a 9.7 year cash flow
Mhm.
payback. And I could tell you, let me see here, let's see, it's gonna be down that one. In fact, well, zero here.
assuming all else is equal, obviously.
Because the IRA dollars are
Moves us-
automatic, that's not a competitive thing, right? You mentioned Act 128 and net metering, so whatever offsets or benefits those bring financially are assured. It's just the solar for schools that is competitive.
There's a lot of talk about, is the IRA gonna be clawed back, and 30%. So there's still a lot of concern there. I think, and everyone's really trying to figure this out. It's really that very hot issue right now. I think the 30% general tax credit is, I'm sure that's gonna be fine for a long time. What I get a little concerned about is for, the changeover for nonprofits, because that's actually cash that is being, handed and a check. And given the fact that the IRS may get, lose a lot of employees, they may be delayed when you get that check. So there may be other kinds of weird complications that might come out of that to, really drag it down,
So as opposed to like a tax credit.
Yeah, right.
You would see as an actual.
Yeah, and that's gonna take, so, and all working the way it's supposed to be working, after you get the system in, then it's sort of, that check may not come by way of, for over a year, it's like when, it's basically toward the tax, it's really the tax point of which that you would be filing, that's when you would actually get that. So that's what we're talking about, having bridge loans and things like that to cover you until you get that, check.
And I think it's important that they did a webinar this week too. I think they're not gonna make, DCED's not gonna make their determinations until May of 2025.
Yeah.
On solar for schools.
And then you have 3 years, if you do get the grant, or be awarded the grant, you have 3 years to actually do the project, so you got some time there. Let me see, I see a pretty terrible response, I think I got almost, like over 17 years get positive cash flow when I take away that grant. I don't know why I would see it jump that high. I should look at it a little bit more closely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if we get the information eventually, for, like I said, for the grant application, I think it's fine. I mean, I think we have yours fine, but if you could look at those numbers for, minus the grant, but including everything else, the IRA, Act 29 and so forth.
Mhm.
And is it correct that the next decision for the board is to authorize Solar for Schools application, but that does not commit us to
Yeah, right.
and because these are just, right, we'd have to, once we know what funding is available, then we would go out to bid and get pricing competitively for.
Right, so the next step for the board would be to approve the resolution which authorizes, generally it would be the board president and the board secretary to sign the documents through the application.
Right,
And
just say
so
that.
basically that, you'd be giving authorization to apply. As far as procurement, you have two options. You can do an ESCO agreement, a GISA agreement, which when I talked to the solicitor's office, that was really the route that they recommended, because it's guaranteed energy savings. The company that does that installation is basically on the hook for making sure that we gain the savings that they're stating that we were entitled to.
Yeah, and I think, so the amount that's awarded is based on the feasibility study. It's not based on the actual bid that comes in. So that's kind of a weird thing. So, I mean, we're showing, I'm looking at, Linwood right here. Yeah, if you could back up the slides a little bit, the Commonwealth grant is about $200,000 is what comes in from the grant program. Now, and that was based on that 30% or a little bit less than the 30% in condition like this. Let's say you put this out for bid, and in fact, now we're assuming the system's going to cost $676,000. Now, if the bids come in higher than that, you're still going to get that $200,000. That's it. You're not going to be. It's not relative to what those bids come in at. And if the bids come in lower, then you'll get actually a reduced amount relative to that. So
If we take it away, they won't top it off.
Yeah.
You're not just taking your best guess at this point.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, this is really for determining, should we go to the next step or not? That's what this is all about,
I was struck by, Chatham looks, much more attractive, and we also get more grant money, right? Because it's a larger system, I believe.
Yeah, well, yeah, in dollars you do, but relatively it's the same
Okay,
amount.
same
Yeah.
percentage.
Let me think. Yeah, actually, and you're getting closer to the cap of it too, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the Chatham proposal had 300, we were capped out.
Right, exactly. So you probably just hit it, so you're really
97%,
maximizing
yeah.
what you can get out of that.
So the Chatham proposal basically maximizes the benefit from this
Yeah.
program.
I think so. Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt to submit both, is that what I mean?
Why not? I mean, it's, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. In fact, it's almost probably a better chance, because that it might be considered like, oh, give them one of them, instead of you only have one, like, you know what, forget them. So you might as well go for it.
Okay. Well, thank you for your work.
Yeah, I would just ask, because the Chatham proposal looks so different from the last one we had seen, where the capacity of the solar arrays, we're only gonna provide half of the building's energy. Maybe we just do a double check on the energy utilization pattern there.
Mhm.
Well, when I looked at it, and I looked at Crabtree's proposal, I mean, the size of the array is that's the difference. The array proposed here is almost twice the size of what Crabtree.
Okay.
For
And that's
Chatham?
for
Well, Chatham's different anyway, because we have more construction there too, so more roof area.
More roof area.
Yeah.
But I guess that is a question of why did Crabtree have a smaller array size?
We have this discussion all the time with districts. The challenge is you're trying not to do an array that's, well, on bid day, that the arrays that we presented to you, there was a substantial cost even with grant money. So you're trying to balance it. If you do the entire building, it becomes quite a large price tag to prove that. So a lot of times you're balancing of what's appropriate. You know, I had one school in Philadelphia where we showed them everywhere we could do solar, and I thought they were gonna take 30% of it, and they decided to do the entire program. But then I've got another solar array that we're approving the bids on Monday night in State College, and it's about 38% of the building's power. So it's just a discussion and trying to balance what the district's comfortable with approving.
Yeah, I mean, you always want to, you want to do the tech potential, you want to throw everything out there, and then it could very well be the budget that kind of, you know, curbs it back, and that's
Right.
fine.
Well, that's what I wanted to follow up on. So we're just applying for the grant, and if at the end of the day we'd say maybe that size that you proposed, the Crabtree proposed, we would simply, the award amount would simply scale back. Is that right? So we're not really committing to a particular size array. We're committing to this is what the full potential of the site is.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that subject, I want to make sure that you understand our design methods. So if you've ever been on a commercial roof, it's flat nominally, and typically it has center drains or multiple lines of drains along the length typically. And the insulation that's put on top of the roof is flush to the roof, but it's tapered so that there's these large triangles, we call them crickets, that take the flow of the water and try to get it to the drain by creating these little mounds. If you were to look at the roof, and you certainly can, you'll see a lot of crickets. And the water comes down off of the flush flow, and it hits a little valley, very, very low valley. Our design approach is to navigate over all the crickets, and that's not everybody's approach, and it's probably not the approach of the facility guy who has to get up there in some situations, and I guess Chatham would be the situation where there's leaves on the roof. So I want to make it known that that was our design approach. You would have seen a very different design if you told me, stay off the crickets. It's not typically done, but I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It just reduces the size of the system.
Okay, so if we get, just to follow, if we get the grant, we would be then working subsequently. I think Mr. Tessin said we would go through a procurement process, design process.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And by the way, you said that I'm sorry, you said that we wouldn't know about the grants. Well, you said that the latest that they might award them is May, or?
Yes, that was when the first round would be determined.
Okay, but it's, cause I thought it was a first come, first served kind of a arrangement. Is that not the case?
So it is, but I think they won't make the actual distribution until May, the
Oh,
notification.
so they won't notify us until.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, so moving on to informational items. The first is, Rob's actually here this evening because we have an RFP that will be presented to the board on Thursday for a network wiring project that will fall under the E-rate program at the high school.
So each year we do a few projects under E-rate. E-rate is a federal program where we receive about 40% reimbursement on whatever projects we fund through there. What we're looking to do this year and the last year of the current E-rate cycle is to begin rewiring of the network wiring within Haverford High School. A vast majority of that was installed originally in 1998 with minimal upgrades along the way since then. It's one of the projects that we can do under E-rate Category 2 projects. So we'll be putting out a bid We'll be coming to the board asking to put out for a bid to get quotes to start maybe doing half of the high school this year and then finishing it up maybe in the future year.
And the board had previously approved a consultant that helps with the E-rate, is that correct? And
Correct.
this is an example of a project that they would facilitate.
Yep, he's been working to help pull together the bid documents that, follow the E-rate guidelines so that we meet all of our deadlines and everything like that. Thank you.
The next item under informational items was an approval of an agreement with Trans Tax Advisors. So we were contacted by this company, and they actually do work to help municipalities gain the alternative fuel tax credit. So the tax credit for using the propane buses and implementing that in the district. So I did reach out to our colleague at Radnor. They also did a similar agreement with this company, and they had about a net savings of $20,000. So I felt it was worth kind of looking into just seeing what we could get from them, just to kind of get a benefit of going that extra step and converting to propane. If we can get a little extra income to offset that effort. So obviously pending final solicitor review of that agreement, we'll have that available for the board next Thursday.
And I just had a chance to glance at this. Is it correct that their fee is based on the savings that they generate?
Yes, so it's a 25% fee based on the collection. So there's no fee outside of that. If they're not successful in filing for the district, they would not receive any fee for their service.
Okay, so win-win.
Yes, absolutely. So it's that net savings just on the effort that has been made by transportation. We already talked about the electric school bus grant, so that was.
Yeah, and I guess we're not scheduled to, we're scheduled to purchase buses this year that are propane. The school bus program would cover, does it cover only, you cover the difference of the cost of a typical bus versus the price of electric bus? Does it include the cost differential between a propane bus and an electric bus? Or is it just talking going from diesel to electric? I guess that'd be a question.
Dave, the way I understood it, it was diesel only, diesel
Okay.
to electric bus.
Gotcha, okay. So that's a no-go then? We've already decided to purchase propane, we already have the, or is that something that we're doing next year?
Yeah. So with only 4 diesel buses remaining in the fleet, I don't see how we could use that aspect of it, but like I said, we can use that clean school bus rebate towards these 4 that we have remaining. And then, like you said, while we have those 3 buffer years, that would also be the time to look, into what it would take if we did a pilot program with that Highland, with the electric school bus.
That grant program that may be gone, right? And there's no guarantee the grant program will be renewed.
There's no guarantee, right? And especially with change in administration,
Exactly.
we don't know what the likelihood of the continuation will be.
I mean, is there I'm trying to thread the needle here. Is it, with the buses that we're replacing, is it possible to look at, you say there are 4 buses that are diesel that are remaining. Is it possible just to look to see if there's a potential for getting to electric as opposed to propane? Or is that, I'm wondering, because if the grant covers the cost differential, the question is, it probably doesn't cover the infrastructure, the hardware.
Infrastructure. Yeah, I don't believe it covers the cost of the infrastructure.
And that typically for a commercial charging station, it's about, for the most up-to-date one,
Yeah.
it's like a 280, it's like, what, but $100,000 I think
Yeah.
for one that has two.
Right, 2 chargers.
Two chargers
Correct.
on it, right?
Yep.
It's called like a PC 280s. I'm learning about this now because
No.
of this project, so I've got some info on that.
There was that company, that bus fleet company in that webinar that does the actual
There was.
assessment and evaluation, so that's.
What's the, and do they, I wasn't entirely clear. Do they will handle everything electric at the school, correct?
That was my understanding.
Like
They-
you would hire them and they would do all this?
Right, they're your consultant to see from the beginning to the,
Right. And that includes application for the grant?
yes. Yeah, that was my understanding, they actually help implement.
Possible just to, I mean, I just want to reach out to them to kind of see what that would entail, kind of what that
We
would
can
look
certainly
like.
get more information.
Yeah.
And I think even, Kevin, you could probably get information at Unionville, they
Yeah.
had two.
Sure.
Yeah.
What were the infrastructure costs
Mhm.
that they incurred?
Yeah,
Tony can get information,
absolutely.
what would be involved, absolutely should be able to. get
And,
into that.
and those buses, do they require a commercial charger or can you use it a trickle charger?
No, they require commercial.
They require commercial
Yeah,
charger, you can't
yeah.
just.
You know, it's not like like a Tesla, like your own
Yeah, it's like
personal.
a plug-in hybrid, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I got you, okay. I just wanna know, kind of what it looks like, what the cost would be if the buses are cost neutral, if you will, because, the grant would cover the addition of that. If the infrastructure is not that much, and if we have somebody, outside companies kind of handling that, if you will, it just might be a way, like I said, of kind of a soft land, kind of a soft approach, if you will, to the next generation of
Sure.
of the fleet.
It-
Called the fleet.
Essentially, it'd just be a matter if they came back and said, you're not a prioritized school district.
Well, that's the other thing, yeah,
Right.
I understand that. When
Yeah.
I operate the school district, on the negative side, and positive side,
Sure.
we use grants pretty well.
Right.
From
Absolutely.
what I understand,
Yeah,
so.
no, we can definitely
It's
look
a bit
at
of a
it.
give, yeah, it's a bit of a give and take. I know if you're in a private school district, a lot of times they're not as good of a credit rating, not as good of a.
Sure.
With grants, we have that. It's really a balancing act. But it's one thing I just wanted to kind of explore, just like I said, because I would hate to jump feet first into an EV program in 3 years and have buses breaking down in the middle of Derby Road, for example, so,
Right.
so we have a couple to kind of like start with and you see how they work. If, we get money through the grant, might be an opportunity, I just want to miss it, and I believe those grants don't open until January. So we have some time
Correct.
to think about that. While we have the time, we might as well do the research, figure out what we
Yep.
need, what it entails.
Sure.
And I would also suggest, Kevin, that you find out what that space requirement, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
that
where
space
where
requirement
exactly?
is.
we could-
Where, when Kevin mentioned about space down at the bus yard, maintenance and transportation, it's not that it's uncomfortable. We have employees in some employee groups who arrive at work over an hour before their day starts, and the reason they do is to get a parking spot.
No, I got you.
So, like, we have been talking with the township, they have clearly outgrown that space. So whether we find some other place for the maintenance staff, or, I don't know, but I just wanna make sure we don't look at, this would be great, and then we find out that it requires a lot of space for whatever the charging.
Right, yeah.
I'm sure it's
you
a
know,
little bit different charging a school bus
Sure.
than it is the car that you
Absolutely.
see down at Township.
Yeah, and we did have that conversation with the township in, I believe it was October. Just, the fact that if we were getting completely out of the diesel industry and the fact that they fuel up their trash trucks, fire trucks, all that stuff, what that would look like. And then, of course, if the township would then have to, provide their own tank and all that, and giving them the opportunity to kind of plan things out. So we did have that conversation with them in October.
And that's the conversation we need to have. I just want to see, first of all, if it's feasible. And if we
Get
say,
more information.
if it doesn't make any sense, then, moot point. If it does make sense, well, then, see if there's something, I mean.
Yeah, then let's have those other conversations then and see what needs to be done.
And what I understand, the filling stations aren't huge, the commercial ones aren't huge. They're like about the size of a typical, what you see at a gas station.
Correct.
From what I've seen,
Yeah,
those are the ones that.
they may be, 5 feet high.
Yeah.
2 feet wide or so.
And depending on what kind of charger, they have one for like the Tesla type charger, one for the standard type. There is-
Exactly. And then, can one charger charge 2 buses?
Yeah.
Right?
I think the way it is, like, one will charge and then the other one will start
Yeah,
after that one. So
exactly.
they can't do it at the same time.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
No, we'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, I just want to comment, Dr. Rishi talked about the space. My understanding is it would require a huge investment to try to really go into, I mean, we'd have to alter the space requirement, you know.
Yeah. The
Maybe a pilot program would work, but
yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah, the space alone, and, you know, when JR had the electrical engineering, like I said, it was over $5 million. And that wasn't even speaking with Pico about a substation, or the township, whether they could put in a substation. That was just strictly for, let's say, 70 vehicles, right? If we ended up going the entire fleet, and you know, 35 chargers, let's say, if we could charge. So it was definitely, it was a lot of money.
Ken, what would that do to your timeline, like if we were thinking electric and waiting, because I know sometimes with the bus production, it does take them long.
It does. I don't know right now, you know, what the timeline would be for an electric bus. Those four that we really need are 48 passenger handicap wheelchair. You know, do they make those, or are they making just 72 passenger electric buses? But certainly, you know, we'll reach out and see what we can find out. And then, you know, just to piggyback off of that alternative fuel tax credit, right now, while we're in the winter months, we pay $1.15 a gallon for propane. We actually paid about 81 cents towards the end of the summer and into the fall. We got some fluctuation with the vendor that we're using, but we're locked in right now at $1.15 just because of the winter months and the cost of propane during the winter months. So, that, you know, every bit of savings helps.
Diesel's what, like four or $5 now?
Diesel through the county bid, I believe it's $2.66.
Yeah.
But, you know, big difference for sure.
No, it's
Yeah.
well, it's like gallons.
Yep, exactly.
2%, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So the next item on the informational items was the financial reports. So this is just your expenses and your revenues up through the month of November. Just kind of like a summary highlight of where November is. As far as revenues, we're a little over 77% collected, and majority of that is in local sources where our tax revenue resides. So local sources were about 90% collected, and then state sources, where your subsidies come through, we're about 25% collected, and a lot of that is just the timing of when subsidies are issued by PDE, how they are chunked up throughout the year. And then federal sources were about 15% collected. And part of that has to do with the way we spend our federal funds and how the quarterly reports are filed. So that's just a matter of timing on that piece. On your revenues, on your expenditure side, so expenditures as a whole for the general fund were about 36% spent. So that's pretty good for being 5 months into the year, into the fiscal year. Salaries and benefits, which is your larger portion, is about 31% spent. So you're about a third for 5 months into the year. And you'll see that progress as we get later into the months. And then your other expenses where you have professional services, you have your utilities and supplies, we're about 50% spent in those areas as well. When I looked at prior year to current year, we're trending about the same as far as this time of the year where our expenditures are at. Sure, absolutely. So the next item is the 23-24 audit update. So the auditors will have the audit for me, the AFR completed for the end of December to meet the deadline for PDE. They will be out in January at the first meeting to give a update and give a report of the operations for 23-24 to the board. And then at the second meeting in January, the board will vote to accept the final audit report that the auditors have for the fiscal year. Early estimate that I have, just a rough estimate, was about a shortfall of about $500,000 for the fiscal year. So as they do some final entries, that may change, but that's approximately where we are with the 23-24 operations.
And when you say a shortfall, we do budget some cushion in each year to absorb that, right? So like, and that's, sounds like a number that's less than even what we had.
Yes, yeah, so we assign fund balance in those cases, so.
So within our budget.
Yes. And then as far as the 25-26 budget, I had 25-25 there. 25-26 26 budget, the timeline for that, based on, and I'll just kind of work from the end point forward. The way our meetings fall in June, we would have the voting meeting to adopt the final budget on June 5th. Meeting till that second meeting would push us a little bit too close to having tax bills generated, and it would impact cash flow. So really, June 5th would be the point where the board would want to adopt the final budget. Working backwards from that, the board would actually adopt a proposed final budget on April 24th. Now, that's just your proposed final. It's not the final, but it's just required by PDE to have a 30-day difference between when you do your final budget adoption and then that preliminary, just giving the public knowledge of what that's going to look like. We put it out on a report. PDE has a report that we make available to the public, so if they choose to inspect it, we put it on our website. Gives them information, high-level information about the budget, more of a summary approach to it. Right now, the Act 1 index, the base year index for 25-26 is set at 4%. Haverford being a district with a higher market value aid ratio, we are at the 4%. Some districts get an adjusted index that's higher based on their market value aid ratio, but since we're in that category that doesn't need that extra cushion, that's where we'll sit at 4%. So the board will see a resolution to adopt the Act 1 index to not exceed the Act 1 index. What that does is it gives us a little more flexibility in preparing the budget. If you were to not adopt that resolution, you'd have to do an accelerated budget in January and kind of start working on that process a lot sooner. So this just says that the board has the ability to go to 4%, not that they will, but just acknowledging that that's the maximum that we would increase taxes. We won't exceed, yes, yeah, that's the maximum. We won't exceed that number in the given budget year.
And when is that resolution?
So we'll see that on December 19th at that agenda. It's officially due by January 30th, based on the Act 1 timeline. But generally, most districts will take care of it in December, knowing that they're going to take that approach and then just start working on the budget from there.
Okay. And then throughout that process, are there things that you need board input on or guidance, or that are more subject to discussion about how the budget comes together, or what should we expect?
Yeah, I guess as I come to the board and make presentations, I think the first, I have a preliminary budget presentation on February 13th at the Finance and Facilities Committee. So that's really going to be kind of, it's a very, very initial look at what that budget is and really kind of getting the board's temperature of where we see taxes, a tax increase to help support those expenditures. What resources do we need to make those items available for the budget? And then on April 3rd, I have a proposed budget presentation. So that should give us some more definite numbers by that point to kind of help make that decision and get the board's input on where they want to see taxes to support the budget.
You should give us some other fun things to talk about besides just the taxing, right? Like,
So we'll call them resources too.
right, and then some of
help
the programs and supports for our educational
Yes,
program and things like that, we want to make sure are funded to support the quality of education, yes.
And then the last item, at one of our meetings, we had a discussion in talking about sustainability, was moving towards a district-wide environmental impact assessment. So kind of getting an idea of, are we using our buildings as efficiently as we should? Are there areas where we could be a little greener in our operations? So I just wanted to put that out there to the committee. Is this something where do we want to look for a consultant that can provide that district-wide assessment aside from, like a capital improvement assessment? This is really like more of an energy, and like I have here, just an environmental impact assessment.
I mean, based on what we've seen tonight, just from some of the potential savings that we possibly have for efficiency, I mean, I think that this is, yeah, I think it's almost like a no-brainer. I mean, because we've been talking about sustainability now for a long time. We're looking at solar, we're looking at things kind of as they come up. I think that if we had a set plan, and we can prioritize those things that are economically beneficial, and I think that's where we gotta start. But I mean, I would love to have a prioritized list where each year we could say, okay, let's tackle these, 3 things, and then move down that list. That, I think, would be ideal, because right now it's like whack-a-mole. I think having it laid out strategically would be a lot better.
So I think a couple things we just need to consider in doing that is, thinking about the end point and, this is where we want to be and how do we get there? What things do we want to measure and what do we want to spend on sustainability? So, if one unit costs me $50,000, but to be really green, it's going to cost me $125,000. Is the district comfortable with that $75,000 incremental cost? So I think as we build this, that would be something to consider.
And it's a curve. I mean, at one point you see minimal gains for much greater cost. It's kind of like not bell curve, the opposite, but similar to a bell curve, where you want to find that sweet spot of where you're saving a good amount of money, you're getting a good impact, but you're not breaking the bank. I mean, obviously we don't want to do that, and I think that we find that sweet spot, but we just don't know what that is right now. So that's why I think a study like this would be fantastic. Efficiency could be a focus. I know that a clean or green cleaning products is another focus. A lot of districts have done these. I have a bunch of them actually that downloaded, but I mean, I think that actually if we look at our policy, that lays out a very good roadmap, if you will, a very good scope almost as to what we want to see in one of these assessments.
Okay. Is that something that the board would want to see the motion to issue an RFP on the next board meeting, or is that something that we want to have further discussion?
Asking me, I mean,
The committee as a whole, I mean, is that something that we want to?
I feel like it needs further definition, I'm not exactly clear, and then I know that, in the discussion at a board meeting when we were voting on purchasing 100% renewable energy, a board member brought up, well, how do we know that that's the right investment to make? I think if we're going to have a question at that point, right, like, if we've got resources to commit, are we certain that solar is the first best thing to do? And is that part of the scope, or like, I think I'd want to have a little more clarity on what it means to have an environmental impact assessment
I think when we do that.
before a proposal like that we would vote on.
Sure. No, I mean, I'm fine with that. Just, yeah.
What I would recommend is energy audit, like what is the usage in our buildings?
Did we not have that with the facility study that Crabtree did when we looked at Russ? Wasn't there some component of that? What that was? Some efficiency piece. Okay.
But, one thing that was striking in my presentations was the difference between Lakewood and Chatham.
Mhm.
What is driving that? And how do we understand that? How do we integrate that with our purchases of energy? So an energy audit was the first thing in the resolution we passed earlier this year.
Can I make a recommendation? The first thing you can do, it'll cost you nothing. First thing you can do that'll cost you nothing, that'll give you some navigation, but more importantly, it'll give you a scorecard for each one of these buildings, is to do Energy Star Portfolio Manager benchmarking. Free tool. In Philadelphia, every building greater than 5,000 square feet has to do benchmarking. It not only will give you one place to look at all your energy costs, it'll also include the fuel, the water, and here's the real benefit, is that you can press a button and it'll give you your greenhouse gas. So it gives you every unit you want to know about energy, it gives you the budget, and it gives you the environmental impact. So it's very high level, but the way that it works is that there's a huge database the government maintains, and when you put your building in, it sorts out that database so that all of the schools that are like yours in the same weather are plotted, and then they do a regression analysis, and you're plotted against your building compatriots, and you get a number between a 0 and 100. So you get an actual score, and
if you're in the top quartile or 75% or greater, you get an Energy Star label. If you get buildings that score at 11 or 12 or 22, you've got a big opportunity, again, relative to other schools. But from a big data point of view, it's just crunching all your bills. You have to put the building in as far as square footage and what each square footage is, but that's not a difficult task in a school. And it's a really, really good way for you to start today and say, hey, in 5 years, we want our score to go from this to this without talking anything else about choices or whatever. It's like, improve the score. So it's a very powerful, simple, cost-effective way to develop a strategy and then be able to follow through for years.
Who's that through, by the way?
That's EPA. Yeah.
That would be a good starting point, I guess, just for if we could think like that for informational item at a meeting, I think that'd be great. And then that might tell us what we want this energy impact assessment RFP to actually look like. I mean, if we find that our buildings are all at 20, or or whatever, then maybe it's like, okay, let's focus on energy. If we find that buildings are a little better than that, like, okay, energy should be done at these buildings. The other ones to look at, that's fine, says. Okay. Yep, I like that, yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you for the input.
That's all I have for informational items and for the agenda.
Okay, but there is time on the agenda for public comment if anybody would like to speak.
Hello, Sarah Johnson. I'm a resident of the district, or the township. Yeah, I had a couple questions. Mr. Schwartz, you had mentioned maybe making plans of doing the cost-effective things first, and you mentioned using green products. And as they were doing the presentation for Coopertown, I was wondering how much, say, the district would have in the type of products that are used, because there's a lot of information coming out that a lot of flooring is off-gassing, and we know that kids, there's a lot of changes happening in kids' health. Children are going through puberty at younger ages. Pediatricians are really concerned, and there's tons of debate on what's causing food allergies and all these different things that we've seen a dramatic change in children's health in just one generation. And anybody in their 40s, 50s, 60s will remember there wasn't children with peanut allergies, and children were getting puberty much later. So I'm just wondering how much control the district has in choosing flooring and just choosing products that aren't going to be toxic for the kids. Because I do think some of these products, you see it at Home Depot, and it's great and it's cheap for a reason. It's full of chemicals, and when you have heating near it, it really starts to off-gas, and I just don't, I don't want that to become the new asbestos that then has to be taken out of buildings. So I would just really look at the type of products we're using. I personally don't have young elementary school children, but I would be very concerned, as a parent or guardian, just really looking at what our kids are being exposed to. And then for the gentleman that gave the solar panel presentation, I was just wondering, when you crunch the maintenance costs, are you looking at that specifically for this part of the country? Because I know the maintenance, I don't know a ton about solar, but I know the maintenance costs are much lower, in like the Southwest, where you don't have nor'easters running through and hailstorms. So I think on one of the schools, it was like $95,000 over 30 years, and the other one was $139,000. And I'm just wondering how those numbers are crunched, because I know, just from people that I know that have had solar panels on their houses, it's like, they are, their electric bill is nothing, but then, if there's a big storm that goes through, they have to replace the panels, and there is a lot of maintenance costs that, so I'm just wondering, like, when you did the maintenance over the 30 years, if that was like really specifically looking at other large buildings or those type of roofs, and if that maintenance is like just the actual panels or hiring people to come. I was just wondering, because I think that's kind of a big part of it.
Yeah, we can ask him to respond.
And just while, Ryan, I'll mention with the whole green product thing that I was talking about, that's exactly why I think we want to have one of these assessments. Maybe we are using the what's best for kids' health and everything, but I mean, if we're not, that's why I think we have to find out. And if using something that has less chemicals costs a little bit more, that's when you kind of factor in like, okay, well, maybe we save some doing one thing, we spend a little bit more getting different products. That's exactly the kind of thing I want to look at, because yeah, I do have kids who are at school, and I don't want them breathing anything they shouldn't be breathing in.
5G as well, look at that, look at the 5G in the schools, because we don't know if that's causing cancer. You know, the Wi-Fi, the kids are being exposed to a lot, you know, we just don't know the long-term effects of that either.
So the O&M, the operating maintenance costs, it was really looking at just equipment replacement requirements, you know, so, and it's mostly, the weak spot for solars, the inverters that converts the DC to AC. They typically have a 10-year warranty, and then they have to be replaced. I mean, it's like a computer, it's gonna burn out. So we kind of spread that over. I do it a little differently. You could have it just on the 10-year. You could have the increase in the cost. I tend to spread it out, diversify it across all the years. You're really talking about, you know, catastrophic, you know, weather conditions, and I have to say, by and large, solar kind of survives pretty well under a lot of even hurricanes and things like that. You'll see down in Florida, it's amazing what still survives. There was a fascinating picture recently with, I guess it was, you know, that huge storm that came through North Carolina, and I seen this aerial view of this solar farm, and you just saw this tornado went right through it diagonally and just took out, you saw a line, took out all the solar modules, so nothing would survive that anyway. But by and large, I mean, they can, you know, they're really well, I mean, they're spec'd to take like a 1-inch diameter hailstone at 50 miles an hour onto the glass. So they survive pretty well under a lot of conditions, but the O&M didn't have that included in that kind of analysis.
My understanding is that the modules themselves are encased in shatterproof glass, like almost bulletproof glass, pretty much.
Well, it's tempered glass, you know. Yeah. So it's pretty rigid. I mean, but it does happen. I mean, there's cases where, you know, suddenly the glass is shattered. I mean, I was up in Allentown. Allentown, Lehigh. They have the county building has solar up on the roof there. Someone, like, you know, they found a shattered panel. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And oh, look, there's a bullet laying next to it, you know. So someone up and landed. Yeah. So apparently, yeah. No, but I mean, by and large, though, the panels themselves really are the most resilient and lasting for a long time.
And I believe that there's calculations in there, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, for they do degrade a little bit over time. So I mean, that is factored into the overall cost savings, because a panel that functions 100% year 1 may function at 70% year 30.
Yeah, I mean, so it's about 0.5% of degradation per year. That's in the only analysis as well. Yeah.
Okay. That's the cash flow analysis, not the O&M analysis. The overall cash flow.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who wants